Hello and welcome back to understanding what symbols are in Flash. Where we left off on the last recording was the ability to differentiate between a drawing object, a bitmapped object right here, as well as a symboled object. Noticing in my library area, I now have three different symbols: the beach ball, the flip-flops, and the snowman. And as I'd mentioned before, each repetition or repeat of their existence in the stage area is a repeat of an instance. That is the terminology that is used to differentiate symbols from their existence on the stage or different instances of the symbols. So I'm going to go through and kind of clear off my stage area. It's getting kind of cluttered with some stuff. Remove some of those. You'll notice I'm not cluttering or removing these items quite yet because these in fact are my non-symboled objects at this time. So the next one I'm going to do is actually the snowflake, and the reason for this is if you click off and click on, you'll notice because all of the lines are actually connected that we have a full recording, or I mean a full object selected. So with that, if you recall, you can either go to Modify, Convert to Symbol, or you can press the F8 key on your keyboard. Either way will get you to converting to a symbol window. We are going to make this a graphics, GFX, and then snowflake. Oops. And we're going to leave it as a graphic and with the registration in the center. So we're going to press OK. Notice that we have snowflake here. At this time, I'm not really going to concern myself so much with these other objects in the stage, so I'm going to remove them, as well as these down below, so my scene starts taking effect. Now, because I just converted this snowflake into a symboled object, the graphic type, I can easily delete it, likewise all the other ones, and then drop it onto the stage area without any kind of issue. Alright, so that being said, let's say I want to take the snowflake and I wanted to change the color of it. So you recall on the last video in part 1, if I were to double click on this snowflake, it would take me into symbol edit mode. Up here on the breadcrumb, you would see I'm working with just the snowflake, and I can go in the properties and make a change of color. So let's say I go with this blue color. Alright, snazzle dazzle, click on scene 1 back on my breadcrumb, and you'll see that this instance of the snowflake is blue. And now, because I changed the actual snowflake, every time I add a new snowflake, it's going to come in as blue. So far, so good. So now, let's say I decide that I really kind of want to work with the snowflake a little bit further, and double-clicking on the snowflake in this window is fine right now to modify my symbol. However, sometimes you might find yourself in a full scene, such as like a full snow scene, and so getting into the nitty-gritty of the snowflake in this particular view can be somewhat difficult. So I'm going to go back to scene 1. And I'm going to get out of my symbol edit mode, and instead I'm going to come over to the library area, and I'm going to double click on my snowflake from here. Now the difference between double clicking on the main stage area, which we had just done a second ago, and what we did just here, is this allows us to really focus in on the one snowflake. You'll see there's no other objects there. We've not removed the other snowflakes from the main scene. It just allows us to really zoom in on this particular one. So over here on my toolbar, I'm going to click on my zoom tool and zoom in a little bit closer so I can get a good bird's eye view, so to speak, of the snowflake. Okay, let's say we wanted to, again, let's change the colors of the snowflake. I'm going to go with something fairly pale so that way I can do a little bit more modifications to it. So here's a nice light green snowflake that we've just created. If I so desire to apply an outline to the snowflake, you may recall that we would click on the paint bucket and go to the ink bottle. And with that, I would choose a new stroke color. So we'll go with a real muted, maybe lighter green color. And we'll click on any edge around the snowflake, and you can kind of see how it fills in every single edge that it can get access to. Now it has a border to it. Looks good. Okay, so I'm going to go back to scene 1, and when I do this, going back to scene 1, it's going to take me out of symbol edit mode and take me back to my original stage area of the scene. Where did you go? Oh, I'm zoomed in. So let's go back to fit window. Okay, very good. Sorry about that. because I zoomed in with my magnifying glass on the symbol, I was zoomed into a small area of the main stage. So nonetheless, what you'll see here is that each one of these 3 snowflakes now has that outlined kind of echoey or shadowed edge look to it. So far, so good. So now I'd say, well, I'd like to kind of modify so that way not all snowflakes look exactly correct or exactly alike. So each instance can be somewhat different. We can do that by first selecting a snowflake, as you'll see we have done here, and then instead of using the selection arrow, jump down to what's called the Free Transform tool. Now the Free Transform tool, if you hover over in one of the corners, hold down your Shift key, you'll get a perfectly resized object. So it's not stretched, it's not skewed, it's just a little bit smaller or a little bit larger. And then if you hover in any one of the corners, you'll get that little 270-degree circle that kind of simulates that you can rotate the object a little bit. So again, I'm going to switch to another one. And again, if you don't go with a corner and hold the Shift key and you go with an edge, you'll stretch it, Control Z. You can skew it, Control Z. You can even offset it in this direction if that's the look you're going for. So you got a lot of different functionalities there. In the case of the snowflake, I'm actually going to be fairly uniformed with it and give a little bit of rotation again so that way it doesn't look exactly perpendicular like this one does right here. Okay, so with that, I want to do further modification. The snowflakes looks exactly correct, or exactly alike. So I'm going to do one other neat little feature here, and I'm going to switch back to my selection arrow just as a good technique is to go back to your selection arrow so you don't accidentally change the size of something. You'll see that I've got just one snowflake selected right here, and on the Properties panel on the right side, we're going to click on the arrow next to Color Effect. So for this, we're going to change this to the tint. Okay, now changing the tint of something allows us to enhance the color while still keeping the base color. So what that means is that the base color on this is this green color, and so you can kind of see it kind of lightened up a little bit because the current tint is set to white. However, should I change the current tint to a blue? It's not exactly the same color blue. You can see that there's a slight variation between this blue and this blue because it's applying this new selected color blue on top of this already greenish color. Okay, likewise, if we go with like a brown color, this isn't the exact same brown color because it's tinting this greenish color with this dark brown color to give you this grayish brownish color. So that's kind of how the tint works. You can continue to further enhance the tint and decrease the tint. So at 50%, which is what the default is set to, it does a nice little combination between the green color and the brown color to give you this grayish color. If you want to pull through a little bit more of the default color, which is that greenish color, you can decrease the tint amount. And if you would like it to be full on 100%, the brown color that I've just selected, certainly you can change your tint to 100% and it will completely ignore the base greenish color that was there and give you full on dark brown color as we have chosen here. So each one of these instances of snowflakes can now take on a new look by modifying the tint just a little bit for each one. So this gives you a slight variation without having to go through major modifications of each one of the colors for each of the snowflakes. Pretty nifty. For this particular one, I'm not going to modify the tint of it, so you'll see that when I selected the snowflake, my color effect is still set to none. However, should I choose tint, it would go with one of the last known tint that we have chosen there. But in this case, I'm going to switch it over to alpha. And then the thing about alpha is by default, we see something at 100%. So if you want to see a little less of something, we can decrease the alpha to set it off into the distance. Maybe it's in the middle of a windstorm or a snowstorm, what have you. So we can modify the intensity of the color that's pulling through on a particular object by modifying the alpha. Now these effects that I've just gone through with the tint and the alpha are specific to symbols. So the drawing objects that we had before, or if I were to create myself a new drawing object here, I don't have those same abilities. So you'll see that here's the new drawing object I've just created. It is not a symbol, and you'll see that you don't have that color choice here with the alpha and the tint, etc. So hopefully that explains that a little bit further. In my library, just to go back to here, you'll notice I still have the same 4 symbols that we had before. And in particular, the original snowflake is still here with that original greenish bluish with the outlined greenish yellow color. Even though we've modified these instances with different tints, the original one is still this main color. All that being said, if file size is still your concern, no worries. The modifications that we made with the alpha or the tint are very, very small in effect on having on the file size, because all we're doing is tweaking a little bit of the original snowflake that was out here and doing slight adjustments to it, which ultimately does not have much of an effect on the file size altogether. So hopefully that explains how to do some further effects on top of our objects. The last thing I'll show you is making something into a symbol from scratch. So there's 2 ways of doing this. We can go into the Insert menu at the top here and click on New Symbol. You'll also see that instead of just doing simply an F8, which is to convert to symbol, in this case a Control F8 would allow you to create a new symbol. When you go through the Insert New Symbol method that we've seen right here, you'll see that it's going to prompt you with what your name of your object is going to be. So in this case, we can call this one a party hat, and we're going to leave it as a graphic. And you'll notice that over here on the right hand side there's no registration point information. All is well. So what the registration point is right here where this plus sign is located. That ultimately is going to be your registration point. So to create a party hat in simplest form, we're basically creating it inside of a symbol. So we're going to go over to our shapes over here, and I'm going to create myself a poly star. And under properties of the polystar, as you may recall, we can go into the different tool options. In this case, you remember with the polystar you have a choice of doing a star or a polygon. I am going to leave it as a polygon, but in this case to create the party hat, we're going to leave it as a 3-sided triangle. Leave it as this, and let's modify our party hat color to a purplish red color. We can leave this registration point right where it's at. And as I create my party hat, I'm going to create it up in the upward direction such as this. I can always move my registration point down. So if I want it to be centered on the object, that would be the center point. You'll see it tries to snap to it if you're making an adjustment such as this. If you want the registration point to be at the tip, you certainly can do it there as well. So I'm going to actually move it up to the center here. And then the last thing I would like to create for this party hat is a ball for the top of my hat. The ball is going to be this lovely green color. So a perfect circle with the shift key, and then we can move it down and snap it on top. So there's the circle for that, and then maybe we'll insert a few extra, let's see, ovals, and we'll go with some polka dots. That'll be kind of cute. So the shift key will create you a perfect circle, and then as you may recall, I'm going to go back to my selection arrow. And if you can't see things well enough, always go to your zoom tool. You can zoom in a little closer so that way you can see exactly what you're creating. I'll go back to my selection tool. And because I was working in the drawing object mode, you can kind of see that that new polka dot that I just created has a box around there. And a shortcut to duplicating it is to hold down the Alt key while you're dragging it, and this will create you additional little copies. So we can just copy out our polka dots. That way our hat is nice and detailed with decorations. Holding down the Alt key, it continues to create me copies. As I shift select several of them, I can then create 3 additional copies all at one time. So and then we can move these around a little bit more easy while the copies have already been made. Click off. Make sure you click off so that way multiple ones are not selected. And this one looks like it's a miss. So there we go. So this is a neat little way of creating our party hat here. Drag this up. Okay, so now my party hat's been created. Okay, so you'll notice up here it is set to 400%. So in doing so, I want to make sure I go back to fit in window so that way you can see the original size of the party hat is here. Up here in the breadcrumb area, it is set to creating my, the symbol still, so I'm going to switch back to scene 1. Okay, you'll notice the party hat does not exist yet. It does exist in our library, so here's where the party hat is. Oops, I should rename this actually. to GFX for graphics. GFX, capital G, or capital P. For party hat, my naming convention is always to prefix my objects that are graphics versus movie clips versus button. It helps with alphabetical ordering, and so a collective ordering of them. It certainly isn't necessary, it's just my own little naming convention. But going back to my main scene here, scene area here, once I want to add the party hat to my scene, I simply can click and drag it and add it in. If it's too large or too small, go to your free transform tool, hold down your shift key, and then that's how you can maybe make it smaller, narrower, etc., etc. Okay, and so that is how you go about creating a symbol from scratch. Hopefully that answered any questions about that, and either converting an object to a symbol or creating a symbol from scratch. You'll see that we've got the 5 items sitting over here in the library, and likewise with this party hat, just like with the snowflakes, I can drag another instance of it to the stage area. I can still go into my properties, and because it is a symbol, I can go and modify my alpha on there if I want to make it less bright or more bright, etc. I can modify the tint on there, so that way we can give it a different hue of colors if we so desired, and increase the intensity of the tint. It's not changing the color, it's just changing the overall tint of it. Hopefully that explains things pretty well for Chapter 3. Enjoy! Have a great night!